Hello.
Hello.
Oh yeah, cameras. Turn those off. How's it going?
It's good. It's good.
Good.
How are you?
I'm well. A little bit of a headache developing, but other than that, well.
Hmm.
Do you have
I
a project that you're working on or anything? I don't know much about you, so I'm just trying to
I do. I
catch
do.
up.
There is actually the first meeting I joined here, which was recorded, I demoed it.
Right. Yeah.
So I could link that for
Yeah,
you.
I'll go find that and watch that. That's good. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's just it's more focused on like organizing information around problems more generally, and like claims are like a secondary piece of it to like get on the same page about that information. But yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the rough
No, that's good. I think like
summary.
a lot of the stuff everyone's doing is all pieces of the giant puzzle. That's how I see it anyway.
Right. Yeah, definitely cool that is how it is. But yeah, working on it. It's still not it's not like what I would call usable yet. But hello, Mark Antoine.
Hello.
Uh,
Is it available for public to look at, or is it all private still?
It is. It
Okay.
is.
Cool.
Yeah, it's open source and deployed as I merge things. So it will be changing a lot over time. But and currently there's currently the back end is like persisting stuff in local storage. So it's much more malleable. It's so they're kind of more like a prototype, I guess.
That's awesome. I'll definitely check it out here.
Cool.
That's your tool in progress.
Yes. The ameliorate is what I like to quote. But
Okay.
Yep, working on it. And I did start full time on it. I mentioned it when I first wrote the Slack message, but yeah, I've been working on it for a couple weeks now. So
just curious, since you started this spreadsheet, sorry, I'm changing the topic a bit. Did you see the old spreadsheet of Stevens?
Was it? I saw a spreadsheet, it's like an Airtable of like a bunch of tools, like a massive list of tools.
That was probably, I think this might be what Bentley extracted from Stevens' table at some point. So that could be it.
Okay. Then
and enriching
not.
That is why I made that document that you signed, commented on.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, no, we need, here's what I would like to see. And I never filled it. I filled your table. There's a few interesting points in there. There's some I'd like explanations on eventually.
Yeah, that's
but thanks for putting that up. This is one of the many things we started and didn't work on. I think we were all pretty exhausted after writing this very condensed thing for CDL. Hi, Bentley.
the one that you linked, the knowledge management problem definition one.
Yeah,
that one I noticed has a lot more stuff than mine does.
This goes deep, and there's so much there's let me actually share screen. Sorry, this is rehash of old stuff, but I'm trying to. This is a kind of simple dot file of, here's something we're trying to do, and here's the problem, and here's a solution to that, and here's a problem with that, and here's a solution to that, and here's a problem with that. And so the red squares are problems and the green circles are solutions. And, you know, it's a kind of, and by the way, here's the kind of pyramid of problems and solutions and why we think we need the more advanced stuff. This is something I did as part of that maps map while we were writing that text. I don't know if this is anywhere. Let me just put it in the. Is there a channel for it? Oh yeah, it was probably in a private channel, but now it's all open. So let me just. There you are. It's a dot file. You're probably familiar with GraphViz, which is just a format for making diagrams.
Okay. Cool.
So this was my, the time we spent on this was considerable, and we all lost steam, and we had many projects ongoing, including an inventory of tools. And by the way, there's now an effort to do an inventory of tools in the Collaborathon. It's like, okay, folks, how many of us are doing that? Now, that's in the Collaborathon. There's the advantage that Vincent is involved, and Vincent knows of a lot of other efforts. I gave him access to my here are the criterion list document, which he probably had already.
Is Vincent a part of CDL or
No.
at all? Or okay.
No. He's part of OGM, and there's a lot of overlap with the OGM crowd. Open Global Mind, Jerry Michalski, Bentley, and I, and are part of both.
Yeah.
Circles.
So Vincent's working is working on community systems and databases, really. So he has Trove where you can create, and actually we have a CDL identity on Trove, and you can have members, calendaring systems and stuff. So a lot of tools for communities.
Gotcha.
Trove or Catalyst. He's having several different names.
Yeah, the list is used a lot. Just reporting. In the Collaborathon, I'm spending a lot of time with Simon Grant, who's interested in kind of the emotional charge behind misalignment more than the formal process. So that's interesting to have this conversation about how do we elicit understanding of what are the goals and what's at stake, what are the concerns that drive a different way to define things. So that's a conversation we started. I think it's useful, but I'm also basically restarting work on, okay, first little brick, how do I do live concept identifier? So that's what I'm working on these days. Nothing that much to report. It's ongoing.
Any other topics that started today before I came in, or just getting started?
Joel was talking about his tool work, and we started a bit about his spreadsheet.
I was just asking him about it to explore more, to look at what you guys are doing and to try and just like get a better understanding of what everyone's projects are. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking actually that not that this is something we would have to do, but I think Marc-Antoine was like when I first started coming to these, like Marc-Antoine has been the only one so far that's like gone through his tools and the things that he's been working on and like kind of demo or share about all that stuff. And I think maybe the others here have demoed at some point, but I don't know if I've seen those videos or gotten demos from everyone. And so
Yeah,
I would be.
I think everyone has at some point, but also things two things. One is things are changing a lot, of course, and then the other thing is like several people have not worked on their project, and as far as I know, in months. So that we're kind of using this community. So like I don't think Tim was doing gruff debates, but he hasn't worked on that in a long time. And I don't think Steven has done anything on Socrates. I mean, so some people working on different things, some people working on their back end and have nothing really new to show. But we did talk about maybe doing everyone trying to do an update once a quarter or something. Which if people are, if we don't have much else to talk about, I could talk about where I am at, although there's no place. I'm just pushing at a whole bunch of places to see where I can get some traction. So I'm not at anywhere specific.
Right.
We want to do that, or does anyone else have any other? So I can
Head
kind of,
down.
I can, pontificate for a few minutes. And Michael had kind of hit me up about Reasonpedia. Let's see. Although this may not actually be kind of my latest endeavor. So this is the Reasonpedia website. Explore the reasons behind popular and useful arguments and help us find holes in them, which is, I think, kind of the best way to explain what I'm doing with Reason Score, which is a scoring system.
So is Reasonpedia also what you're working on, or is this someone else's?
No, this is mine.
Okay.
So it's another way of expressing it. So Reason Score is kind of the tech where you can take, if you put the facts in the specific order and follow these rules, then you'll get a score that you can argue about with someone else. And it's a way of expressing why your level of confidence, what your level of confidence is in a certain claim, and why it's that at that confidence level is kind of the way I'm thinking about it. The Reason Score is kind of the tech. It was hard for people to understand, so I tried to make Goalybot, which would kind of be a personification of that scoring system, but people kept thinking it was AI, and I'm glad I kind of stopped pushing that now that AI is so big. Because now AI means something that is not logical, right? Because it's heuristical. So I can't really use Goalybot anymore, which is a shame. I really liked the idea. It just it results in the wrong expectations for the viewers. So I thought Reasonpedia, where it's just like this is a general place where hopefully you can go and see some maps of why people believe things. And I hadn't even decided in this how much I wanted to show the scores. I do kind of want to indicate it some, but it may be de-emphasized. So some of the feature things is like why people say saturated fat causes heart disease and why some people say ivermectin doesn't reduce COVID. But I don't have any actual content in here. But the idea is it would be in the they would be kind of a tree view thing that they can explore using the Reason Score. And it might show the scores in several different ways. And I can answer any questions about this, but I've kind of moved on a little bit from this. So like one thing in Open Global Mind, we started doing a sense doing thing because some people wanted to take action, including sense making. And I thought, well, at some point in there, people are going to argue about something, argue about a fact, a Boolean fact, and then I could use that argument as reason for Reason Score and for Reasonpedia. It doesn't seem to be going that way. We seem to be arguing about what to argue about so much that it may never get down to this level of detail. So we'll see. And then I started thinking about it more, and I kind of wanted to create. I thought it might be good to do video walkthroughs because the scoring system and Reason Score, I can't explain it to people mathematically. Either they understand math and I'm not explaining it using the way they like to hear it from someone that actually, like has a degree in mathematics or uses mathematics in the job, or there's someone that doesn't understand those things and I can't explain it to them correctly. It seems to be the easiest way is just show them, hey, when you put something in here, this is how the score changed, and they get an intuitive understanding of how it works, which is really, I think, all that's necessary, so that they know that they can affect the score, and they know that they can see how the arguments relate to each other, and they affect the score. So the scoring system is not a black box. It's like, oh, the score's that because this is here, and I can see that if I change that, it would change the score. As long as I kind of understood, like, if it's your checking account, if you have an Excel spreadsheet with all your charges, you delete one out, the total will change based on what you deleted out. Or if you change a number, the total will change. So just to having people understand that. So then I've been thinking about doing videos, and I came up with the term calling it evidence explorers, because then that kind of gets the idea that you're just kind of looking at the evidence behind it. So that would be kind of like the video thing version of Reasonpedia. But it'd be a series of videos. So hopefully I put one out there, I'd get people complaining about what's wrong or facts I missed. And then I would do another one showing how we're adding their information and then it's changing the score. So then I thought, well, maybe other people, so trying to build a community around this, but people are so, in general, the ability to think logically, specifically, is not a common enough skill set that I think volunteers can do it, at least in the short term. Later on, when you have a large community and it's been around for a while, like editing Wikipedia, it's like people will learn and it'll be a skill, but it's a big thing to bootstrap right now. So I'm going back to my old idea of I'm going to hire someone to do research, and I have in a mastermind group I belong to, one of the guys has been doing design at newspapers for a while. So I was asking him about how do you hire a researcher and how do you phrase it to them the way they want it. So I've been getting some help on that. So I think my next step is hiring a researcher, giving him a task, and then challenging him to build an argument tree in the Reason Score way. Which I don't know if you'll ever, I guess if we're demoing, we should probably go ahead and show Reason Score itself. The reasonscore.com. This is a debate about a city converting their Elm Street to pedestrian use only. So you can see it'll cost $2 million. It'll increase foot traffic to local shops, and it could divert traffic down residential streets, killing children. So you have to weigh all those pros and cons. And the reason why, and the bucket tells the amount of kind of confidence in that, in the total score. So this is, so we're sort of confident that it would be beneficial to convert Elm Street. And this one with diverting traffic down residential streets we have no confidence in that now, because during the debate, someone pointed out that there's a set of railroad tracks that they can convert so the traffic can go down there rather than the main street. So they can so that issue no longer has any weight, so it doesn't affect the final score.
Actually, that's interesting, because in that case, this is an extra mitigating measure, which should change the cost.
Yes.
change the
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, because you're
Saying
now
this will
converting a
cost $2
railroad
million.
track.
Well, it will be more than $2 million if you
Oh, I
also
see, I see.
convert this railroad track into an extra
Ah.
street, which is absolutely fine and justifiable and probably the right thing to do. But I mean, it's when you this is a very good example of how comparisons are intertwinkled, right?
Mm.
It's the base cost is this, and then you improve it this way, and then the cost change, but then you've canceled this argument about life of children by mitigating circumstance, which is good, but it's a different proposal. It's this plus this conversion of this track.
Right, yeah, so there are several ways to handle that, and some of them are explicit in the system and some are explicit, but this is also, a naive system to test out a specific philosophy. So it's a prototype, so it's not
Mhm.
meant to handle all those things. So you could, not building a feature that handles that, you could then have two of these right next to each other, and one includes, 2.5 million, for the cost, and the other one at 2 million, and one has it going down residential streets, and one it doesn't. In theory, if this was happening in like a public discussion or debate over several weeks, then you would up this from 2 million to 2.5 million when you
You
added
just like
the
build
we
in the
can do
assumption that you'd want to not kill children.
Yeah, well, yeah, and no one's probably going to argue that point. And that's another thing to where it's like you could argue something down to the nth degree, but you don't. If everyone agrees on a point, you don't really need to argue it anymore.
Right.
Or even like for the sake of argument, that's something I've been looking at, is how would this be reflected if someone takes the position, for the sake of argument, I will grant this. It's almost like, I think you mentioned you'd have two separate if there's $2 million or $2.5 million, but
But
I'm
that's the way
interested
you would handle it in this kind of half-baked system. Is how you'd copy it, you duplicate it, and just change
right,
some of
yeah,
the things.
very
Mm.
interesting.
And then you could compare the two scores to see which one's more preferable.
Seems like there's I don't know how this would actually fit into a system, but it seems like it should have in the ideal system, it should have like a graph type connection where like this child safety thing is like connected to cost or yeah, I don't know how, if you have like
So,
a cost
yeah,
being 2 million and
and-
cost being 2.5 million, they both would point to the cost and be able to choose between them somehow.
I think it would take some experimentation to see whether that level of complexity actually provides the value, as opposed to just handling it external to the system. I don't think it's a.
Oh,
I agree that it could be, but I don't think it's a shoe-in to say that it is. Because there's almost an unlimited number of potential crossovers and mathematical ways of doing
I
it.
feel like there are probably many cases where it doesn't matter and some cases where it does matter. And
Yeah.
I guess I'd be curious what the some cases where it do matter, how you could actually
Well, right,
handle
but
it.
do you want to spend case time on the some cases that do matter before you prove out the fact that this provides any value whatsoever in its current state? So if I use this and I prove that even on the simple cases, it doesn't actually provide any value to have a score, I don't want to waste my time working on the more complex stuff if it's like, well,
Right.
the core concept doesn't even work.
Yeah, I totally agree with your reasoning.
I have to
Doesn't make sense.
constantly fight back against feature
Struggle.
because every time I show this is almost like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if you had no. Stop you there. Don't add anything. Does this provide any value in its current state?
This is just
Talk
like
to the hand.
It's just like our OGM, the sense doing things where, yes, you can mention that, set it to the side. We're not going to talk about it. Like,
Yeah, and then they mention it again. It's like, I
Mhm.
think we should talk about, we just agreed that we're going to follow one person's thing. We don't, just save that for later. I think we should talk, we're going to get to that. Just not right now. Anyways,
Mhm.
humans are a pain in the ass. I don't think I like them. I'll just stick with computers. I don't even know why I'm talking to you guys right now.
Mhm.
Anyways. So yeah, so I can answer any other questions, even though I so rudely shot anyone down that said anything about it. But that's kind of where I am. I'm like, oh, I want to make a video to sample, to show this stuff, to show this technology in a way that people might understand it, and then get feedback to see, is this project something I need to shut down and just work with Marc-Antoine on his more complex theory, or if I, can pursue it further and cover like 10% of the debate, which can't handle, all the stuff that Marc-Antoine's doing, and that in the full debate that Tim wants to do. Or, or I could just start contributing data to CDL and trying to build out the one shop for it all. So yeah, I just want to prove out this theory first.
Alright. Cool.
Is there any repository of arguments if you wanted to like throw it into a system that you're working on? Be like, here's one. I always go back to the Marc-Antoine mentioned that I used it, the pineapple on pizza argument, but is there more like that you can use to stress test the system?
So, I mean, like you could hit Kialo, and then, each one of our systems has some data like that. So the Ysaurus guys have quite a few, and Socrates Stevens thing has some things. So it's kind of out there. The problem, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't fit into Reason Score because the position and the wording of the debate of the arguments actually affect the score. So there's a lot of rewriting to make use of that stuff.
There's what you can find, and I'm trying to remember where I should keep a better track of this, is there's a lot of tests for AI about detecting arguments, which might contain what you're looking for. Like, can you find the causal argument? Can you find the, but I don't have those references offhand. I'd have to start from scratch or search, but I've seen those go by. I know they exist. And if I were looking for such a data set, that's probably what I'd be looking for. I have a few private files I can't share, unfortunately, because they came from researchers in the field. One but from Mark Klein about the Naples ecology debate. Where I would go maybe is the work of let me find it. And Elido has worked on, what's it called again? I'm just looking the projects and technologies. Debate Hub. Debate Hub will have a lot of stuff.
Oh, I gotta drop off, guys. Talk to you later.
All right.
Okay.
See you.
So yeah, Debate Hub will have, they've actually had discussion. You probably are aware of Debatepedia, which has, where is it again? There's, debate.net now. That's a new one. That's got tons of stuff. Where's Debatepedia? Yeah. Does it still exist? Maybe not. Damn it.
I know ArgTech lists a database set here too. I was kind of looking at that as well, but a lot of them take a
ArgTech
long
has some
time.
amazing stuff. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the one I saw here, and it was from
it seems Debatepedia is dead, but they've got a data set.
There.
Yeah, that's interesting. Dispute, very good, thanks. Oh yeah, there's all the stuff of Araucaria. So yeah, there's well done, well done. So you have as much as I do or more.
It's good to add to. Like, I just want to see, okay, I'll take this. This works in this situation. And there's all these other use cases, kind of like Joel's talking about, like, well, and you guys both mentioned if you change this assumption down here, it affects higher up, and not all argument map data sets have that, and some are just simple. So it's good to add to.
So some of the, I hope that some of the AIFDB actually uses AIF, which would be really interesting because AIF is pretty fancy format with its qualities and downsides, but I really think very highly of it. Just curious.
It looks like you can download as SVG, PNG, .json, LKIF, RTNL, RDF, PL, and edit in OVA.
LKIF, how interesting. This is probably based on KIF, which was knowledge. Yeah, it's based on KIF. No, it's LKIF. I don't know if LKIF depends on KIF. But yeah, I'm really curious about some of these formats. I need to look this stuff. I used to know this stuff, but it's moved on a lot since last time I looked. So thanks for the reference. I will look into this. But yeah, LKIF would be probably my favorite starting point. Argument, premise, conclusion. Nice. Polarity, assumption, role. Good. And RTNL, what is RTNL? I don't know RTNL.
And Marc-Antoine, what have you been working on lately? Or is there anything I can access publicly to kind of just poke around and take a look?
Not code. I've been doing a lot of diagrams and mental models and a few talks and a few, but I haven't written code in a long time, which is a bit ridiculous. I am right now working on code again. I mean, the latest code I wrote was SenseCraft, and now it's a bit stalled because I really want to revisit the principles. But the main thing I'm working on right now, as I said, is this notion of like, we can use sentences as basis, but the sentences ultimately talk about concepts, and I want an identifier for concepts. And an identifier for concepts is, well, concepts are fuzzy. Some of them are about entities, that's fine, but otherwise, abstractions are fuzzy. And that means they're negotiated. So I have my idea of the concept and I describe it a certain way, and you describe it another way, and then it's tentatively matching, maybe not. Oh, what about this case? What about that case? You include it. And this whole negotiation. So we start with a shared identifier, the assumption that it's probably the same thing, and then we poke around the edges and we try to come up with a formal statement, and then we realize somebody else comes along and, oh, but I'm also including this, and oh, for me that's different, oh, for me that's the same, or this distinction matters. So our concept evolves as we use it. And so on the one hand, we use the same name, but the concept definition, both intensive and extensive, changes in time. And we want to mark that there's this continuity. And there's a way in which, when I made a statement about the concept 5 years ago, it's quite possibly still relevant to the new evolved version of the concept because I was holding on to a thread, but it's also possible that it's totally irrelevant and no, that was old thinking and it doesn't matter anymore. So I want to be able to name the thread of the evolving concept and say, here's the name you used 5 years ago. What are you thinking about now that corresponds to this? And maybe it'll be many things. Maybe it'll have branched in distinctions, or it'll have merged with something else or whatever. And meanwhile, while you're doing this, you're aligning with others. So, okay, for me, it's gone this direction, but for Joel, it's gone in that direction. I'm aware of it, and I have another name for what he's thinking about or not. But we started with the same name, but we branched out. And having this awareness that there's, on the one hand, the individual evolution, and on the other hand, the social evolution. So I want to be able to ask the Federation, what are the kind of most agreed upon elements of definition for that concept, and what are the not agreed upon elements of definition, the ones that get people to fork and see it this way or that way. And that's the overall goal. The notion that we're, and of course, when I say concept, it could be individual abstractions, but it's true of claims, right? A claim is a concept and it has its own fuzzy boundary based on its component concepts, but as a claim itself, it has its own fuzzy boundary. So anyway, so I'm trying to create what is the basic API so that I can both ask someone, where are you at with this idea? And here's the identifier. And what's the negotiated social hard consensus and fuzzy not so consensus around this identifier, and where has it gone culturally, and where has it gone in certain subcommunity, and where has it gone for you?
Specifically with that subcommunity, is that like, how do you scope that when you're asking that question of what are the agreed upon and disagreed upon? Is it scoped to a specific subcommunity, or are you trying to do it also completely generally?
I'm trying to do it completely generally. For me, communities would be explicit in the sense like people self-define a community and they're saying, here are statements we're willing to put forth as a community, meaning we've thought about it, we agreed upon that. That's our community consensus on this. Other communities might do it totally differently. We all agreed is one model, and in a way, I guess different communities may have different models, but people agreed to use the community's model and the community's rule. They've self-identified with the community, and hence maybe it's majority, and maybe they may say, you know, I mostly agree with the community overall, but I happen to dissent on this point, this point, this point as an individual, but that only engages me. That's fine too. But it gives you a baseline. But I think it's important to be able to trace, especially for scientific concepts. Well, this is the community consensus of the practitioners, right? Of the scientists who use that discipline and this theory. That's what they mean by this. And there has to be a kind of official version of this. And this is why I want community belonging. There's so many problems with this. Like, for example, there's a lot of people working on the identity aspect, and it's a whole field unto itself. And I'm kind of keeping a separate compartment in my mind. It's like
user identity or like concept identity?
No user identity.
No.
How do you know that this identity corresponds to a real person and this is not a sock puppet?
Right.
I mean, when you're interested in this information, like is this a unique human account? Unsolved problem. I mean, some people do backing identity DIDs with state-sponsored identity, but let's just say that this is not widely accepted yet, and in a way it shouldn't be, because I understand why anonymity matters in certain aspects. And ideally, and this is a complex problem, what we'd want is state identity plus a tumbler.
A tumbler?
Like, you know, they have a tumbler for cryptocurrency, where so that you don't know who, it's a kind of random permutation, hidden random permutation, but you know it's a permutation. So you can have an identity that you know is bound to a real public identity, but you'll never know which one. But you know it's one-to-one with humans.
Hmm.
If you're thinking voting systems, you need something like that. Because otherwise, if the vote is public, it can be subject to all kinds of social pressures, it can be bought, it can be all kinds of things. So public voting has its limits. On the other hand, you want to establish long-term reputation. You know, I've been thinking about this issue for so many years. I've been making these predictions. They turned out right. So I know what I'm talking about. So and that I don't have a solution there. The whole intersection between anonymity in voting and reputation expertise, I don't know what to do there. But I do know that just using self-sovereign identity is not good enough for anything that happens to be a voting system. Anything that relates to here. Now, I'm punting all this. Right now, I'm just looking at, okay, can I assume that every account corresponds to a person? And can I look at the evolution of a concept in an account? Not
Now, in regards to that, like the technology behind that, or the protocol behind that, what are you looking at? Like, I don't know much about any of this. And is it something kind of like a Git, like you can point to a Git commit and here was the idea at this state or this time? And also, have you looked into Noosphere? Has that come across your plate?
What?
yes,
New
a Noosphere.
a newsfeed.
I'm trying to be technology agnostic because I don't want to be tied to a single technology. I'm thinking in of the problem very much in the abstract. Noosphere, if we're talking about the same project, uses words as anchors. And I'm very uncomfortable with that because nobody owns words, which is fine. But that means there'll be a kind of toggle of, no, this word means this word means that. And I don't expect society to achieve a consensus on word or phrase meaning. And I think using phrases as anchors is a mistake.
And so I'm talking about the subconscious Gordon Brander Noosphere, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're referencing because I don't know it, that's all. But that's interesting to take a look into.
Yeah. I like the fact that, he built it on libp2p and great tech achievement. I'm certainly looking at everything IPFS, IPLD related. I'm a big fan of the whole technology. I'm looking at what Fission is doing over their database layer over IPFS. I'm also looking at other techs. I still keep an eye on Holochain because finally it's coming out of its ridiculously long incubation, but I'm not one to talk. I'm also very slow. And I think they got a lot of principles right. Now the execution seems very painful, but I understand why up to a point, and it's valuable. I am looking at other protocols because I am agnostic. Ceramic is interesting. There's many interesting attempts. But yeah, I'm looking at what are the requirements for me in terms of concept so that we can trace history. So there's ownership of how my thinking evolved on this, but there's no struggle over ownership of a phrase or if I ask, okay, what does this phrase mean? I'll see, well, it could be this concept identifier, this one, this one, this one, this one, which are pursued by these people or these communities. And here's kind of the core agreed upon definition elements. And here's the contentious ones. And that gives rise to these subdivision of concept in a formal concept lattice. So you can say this concept, this if this definition element is used, you get to that concept identifier. And if not, you get, like, there would be a kind of canonical lattice that would be referred to at the end of it. And people would be positioning themselves somewhere in the lattice, and the lattice would evolve as people introduce new distinctions. But acknowledging that people, like, there are basic landmarks on the lattice that are kind of the default social aggregation points. And
So
people by default.
When you say lattice, you mean like all the different ways you could distinguish this concept, and then like people choosing a spot on the lattice would be like, well, these are the distinctions I make, and these are the distinctions you make.
Exactly.
Joel, I posted the links in the chat for the noosphere, if just for reference of what we were talking about.
Thanks. Yeah, I started opening it. I won't be able to finish it right.
Yeah, no, totally. I haven't even hardly started. But Mark, in terms of what you're talking about there and the process of agreement or disagreement, even on a concept, do you see that as like a subset of the canonical debate in general? Like if you changed the concept to like a question or a claim, wouldn't the same processes be there? That's kind of what I'm seeing, just as a high level
Absolutely.
idea. Okay.
Yeah, I see that as a foundation for anything that wants to deal with claims. You can't agree on claims unless you know what the claims mean, and that's at the concept level. And the claim is a concept which is built out of smaller concepts. So whenever you update a concept, in a way, that's a question. What's the update cascade to claims that use that concept?
Yeah, and that is kind of what I was getting at with the, if I grant this, from a user experience perspective, I want to be able to see, well, what does the causal chain look like if I have this subset? I'm interested in this subset right now, but I make this change here. How does that affect it so I can address it? And I think that is a very difficult problem, but I'm very interested in trying to solve it.
Okay, well, that's definitely a conversation we can have, because that's what I'm trying to think about on a daily basis. And sometimes, like today, I had set time aside to do it, and I had a headache and I couldn't do much. Insomnia is a killer, but I'm willing to spend more time now. Sure. Who knows? I might be able to. Sorry, I'm just. Okay, here's how I see it. Oh God, I wish I had spent more time. No, today is a bad day for me. Apologies. I'm able to have a conversation, but going.
That's okay. We can do it another time. All good.
But let me still give you the basic question is, what are identifiers for? Ideally, you want the identifier for a given person to give you a snapshot of all the definition elements. But for the group, you want to find, okay, what are the definition elements that are kind of consensual? So what's a definition element, by the way? It's very much a predicate, a frame that distinguishes this concept from a more abstract concept. So there's a kind of infinite regress there. We probably need a kind of everything concept and a few base predicates. In terms of base predicates, I'm very much thinking in terms of the work of the Berkeley frame analysis as possibly a good starting point. It's not the specific thing that matters. It's what do we accept as a basis. Of course, some things will be defined by extension, as I said, and that's fine. And some will be defined by natural language at first. What's important is it must be possible to say, okay, this is a, tentative natural language extension, definition. Let's try to formalize it to identify what are the underlying predicates and make it progressive formalization as usual. Now, once you have that, you've situated the concept in your lattice with your predicate elements. Does that make sense?
I think I'm tracking. Yeah.
Yeah. If I do this and you do this, and we have slightly different predicate elements, and we start comparing notes, the main problem is we won't have used the same definition elements. That's normal. But what will happen most of the time is I'll be able to say, yeah, this definition element feels right. We'll endorse one another's definition elements. In some cases, we'll say, I think what you're saying here is what I said here. So we'll create kind of equivalence classes of definition elements. This seems to correspond to that. So there's many expressions. In progressive formalization is another case of that. So you have expression of definition elements. You have an equivalence class thereof according to people saying, yeah, these two seem to be the same. And that's always provisional, because somebody can come up later and say, oh, I think this case would fall under this definition and not that definition. Still, you need to be able to do it, at least provisionally. And say, hence, here's the joint lattice of, everything of yours I endorse, everything of mine you endorse. And now it's possible that the extension of the concept is still pretty much the same, because maybe we each thought of defining definition elements that the other didn't think of, but we still have carved out pretty much the same set of the universe, right? Aristotle started saying man is the animal that laughs, and then we say, well, laughs and this and that, and there's more defining characteristics for human than laughing. But we still agree on what people are as opposed to non-human animals. And then there's the fuzzy boundary paleontologists worry about, and we'll probably agree to restrict ourselves to sapiens sapiens. And what happens when there's a mutation? And but most of the time we don't care. And that's very important. Being able to say, this boundary case is not relevant to me. And that's also part of the lattice. It's the abstraction. I'm abstracting over this boundary case. I understand it's relevant to some people for their use case, but I'm abstracting over this one. And this position in the lattice, we probably, suppose we did it independently, we each have an identifier. Ideally, we should have the same identifier in the long run. How to do that? Well, between us, if the identifier is not words, but it's a UUID, we don't care, we can flip a coin. And that's important to me, that none of us cares about which identifier we use, because that means that, we meet someone else, and we can have a kind of majority rule. Whoever uses a certain identifier the most, everybody else will switch to that one and have a kind of aggregation to minimize the rewrites. Because we all have to do kind of database rewrites when we switch the identifier. Or maybe what we'll probably do is each have an internal identifier and say our internal identifier corresponds to this in the federation. So that's the external identity of that concept by majority rule. And the moment you add a new distinction that matters, that, oh, here's actually this concept, we thought it was one thing, but we discovered there's this new distinction, and actually, I always meant this part. Sometimes it will be, I'm happy with both, but sometimes I'll go, I always meant this part. So then I'll again have to, okay, the new with distinction part, when the distinction is, again, adopted by enough people, there have to be thresholds there. But it gets a new identity. So my internal identity, I'll switch to, okay, I actually meant this. So my internal thing is, and now the really hard part is that means I'm maintaining my internal database with my internal identifiers, but ideally, I should maintain the live index that updates all the time with the new identifiers, or I should be able to just join with the translation table. So that if somebody asks me, do you have anything about this concept using the federated identifiers, I can answer yea or nay pretty quickly.
Does this map onto like you have running a WordPress website and it's like, hey, you have plugins to update or NPM packages. I want to stay at this package 2.1 point whatever, or I can just update to the latest. Like, I feel like there's something there.
I see it as a continuous process. It's entirely possible that people may want to go more batch, because let's face it, when you get a new distinction and a new updated concept, and you want to review, okay, does that mean I have to review my concept? It's a bit of an imposition. And so you want probably to control when that happens. What I do see as a scenario is let's do it continuously, but let's basically have it as a, not force you to take action immediately because that's absurd, but have a little visual pointer in your UX saying, okay, this has been, the consensus has shifted on this one, so maybe you should review it sometime when appropriate.
When would that actually matter though? So if I have a concept in my head and the consensus changes, at what point as a user does that actually matter to me? And in my head of what we're talking about, it's like, well, if I'm going to engage in a debate or an argument that includes that, well, then I need to be aware. But until then, I actually don't. Like until I'm using it.
That's up to a point correct, up to a point. Okay, I assume some of your stuff is published out there. And that means people may be consulting it, and it's got concept references, right? Because there's a concept map underlying your published work. And if the consensus is, hey, this term that we all use forever, it's not, people now think this claim is false. That's not that important, I agree. But though, if the presupposition you held is now consensus, it's false, maybe you want to find a new support for your argument. But it can also wait. But more important, if somebody thought this term we all used, we thought it meant this, and in reality, there's this profound ambiguity. And so really, we don't know what you meant. We realize that some people have been using it this way, some people have been using it that way, and we don't know what you meant because there's this underlying ambiguity in that term.
But that would only, that should show up in the exploratory process of the argument. That won't show up post hoc of, I posted this, it's changed, now I need to update it. Would
No, I'm saying exactly that.
the second, you're saying the second.
Yes. I'm saying you've posted that, you've used a term that was supposed clear at the time. It became ambiguous. You want to clarify post hoc. You want to update your publication up to a point, but it's good to do it real time because people will be relying on what you're saying. And suddenly it's like, okay, I'm not sure anymore what you were saying.
I still disagree. Why would you need to update it post hoc? Because if I'm thinking like in terms of like, I posted a blog post and it has this concept in it, and that
Yep.
concept relates to all the other things in that blog post.
Yeah.
But I posted that blog post as this concept is as it is. And if we have the UIDs or the handles to link to, someone can say, well, this is what I meant when I posted it. If the consensus of this changes, that doesn't matter because what I posted was this and it's still there.
That would be
Like-
fine. The point I'm interested in is it's much more subtle. It's not people now associate a new meaning with that word. I agree. The old meaning should still mean something. It's people have discovered that the word is ambiguous and can mean one of two things. And that came after the fact. So,
And how would that affect what I posted?
because
Well, if
People
if
don't
there was
know
like a
what you
change in
meant.
social mindset or
clear.
something that across the culture, all of humanity.
I still don't see
realizes-
why that matters, because when I posted it, this is what I meant, and there's a link to it. If
No,
they think it
no.
means something different later, how does that matter?
No. That's still not what I'm saying. It's not that people gave a new meaning to the word. It's that people discovered two new meanings to that word, and now they're not sure. Like we discovered that some people who use this word meant this A, and some people who use this word meant B, and it wasn't clear at the time. It was never clear at the time because people didn't think of the distinction. So they never made clear which one it was in their text. It was inherently ambiguous in the text because the distinction was not thought about.
Like if you write a blog post about going to Paris, I feel like I've heard this one, you know, are you talking about the Paris in Texas or in France? And you just like never say, and you don't talk about like, is it French shops you're going to, or are you going to like barbecue places? You don't say anything of that gives context, but then like there's
Someone asks,
assumption. I guess at that point, like, because you, the
I think
writer
I
of
see
it
now.
knew,
I think I see now. Yeah.
like the writer of it knew, but it never became a problem. People were just like assuming whichever one they were thinking of at the time, and they never thought there was an ambiguity. And then later they realized, oh, there is a Paris in Texas. Which one did you mean? And then, you know, you could clarify the blog post. Like, I was definitely talking about Texas.
So there's
Maybe.
a global undefined distinction, a global undefined understanding of a term, and then a distinction shows up.
yes. And I know it sounds far-fetched said like this, but it's not as rare as people believe. We discover new distinctions all the time, and think of the very abstract terms. You know, one of my favorite example was socialism, right? The feeling about what is socialism is changing because the way the right is using the term is it means anything that helps the public and might hinder the 1%, right? So that's
But that I feel is different, isn't it?
It's no, but it's also, it made people rethink, what do we mean by socialism? And it used to mean like there's a specific meaning for Marx and Engels, and then after Leninism, it took a totally different meaning of centralized state and very bureaucratic central planning. But that central planning was not part of Marx's idea. So if somebody says, I'm a socialist in the 20s, is it Marxist or Leninist? It's not the same.
Wouldn't that be covered because it sounds like what you're talking about is a term that just has no clarifications, no descriptions, no agreed upon. It's just a term. But in the environment we're talking about, when I use a term, it will have at least some clarifications, some distinctions, which would minimize many of these possible Paris situations.
Ideally. But what I'm saying is, I expect people
If you don't know that there's anything to clarify, you might not make it a term.
People don't use definitions most of the time. They use terms. And then when it becomes a problem, it's, oh, I meant this. And then they start to clarify and add definitional elements. But definitional elements come after the fact, after the ambiguity is revealed.
Or something like Paris, but not something like socialism.
I think it's true of socialism too. It's, oh, and by the way, no, I don't mean socialism as in central planning, the 5-year plan. I mean socialism as in, you know, and you hear that all the time in arguments.
That's true. So that seems to come back to a way of discourse.
Yes.
That the user is using first. And like, if I go back to my blog post reference, if I say socialism and I'm making a point about it, I'm going to clarify. I think generally speaking, I won't just, I shouldn't just blanket a very broad thing. Oh, hi, Mark.
I assume that was a misclick.
But that's how but I could be very wrong.
I mean, I think that it all comes down to if you think to distinguish it as a thing in the first place. Like if there was only ever one, if nobody ever talked about Leninist or whatever the second socialism was, then you just say socialism. Maybe you would even say like socialism as Marx defines, even if there's no other conflict. Maybe you would, but maybe you wouldn't, and you wouldn't think. You just assume that like there's only like nobody could possibly get this ambiguous, or nobody could possibly misunderstand this. And then later someone misunderstands it, and you're like, oh, and then you have to go back. Or I feel like if you do have a term, even if there's only one definition and you like termify everything, then when a new definition is discovered or something, it could automatically notify you or something like, oh, this other word has the same exact or this is the same exact word, but it means different things. Maybe you should clarify, or like, I don't know.
Sorry, my
That makes sense.
my computer died. I didn't realize I was running in battery power. I
Oh.
thought I was.
I thought it was something I said.
No.
I'm done with this.
I'm done with this. No. Apologies. Let me just finish the reboot. I tell you. So weird.
I guess where I'm coming from is just my inherent belief about how things work, and I haven't looked into it enough. So that's likely, if I'm just shown it more, I would change my position. I think that probably makes sense.
Yeah, the point is also to make it a system where people introduce definitions as they go, and more, and that means, yeah, the things. But the other thing also is, you say, oh, it's often clear in context. It's often clear in context within a certain community, and it's when you start going across communities that you realize all the hidden assumptions that have to be made explicit. So this is an exercise in discovering the implicit that you obtain by using, like, when your text is interpreted by someone from with totally different assumptions.
Yeah, a couple things I was looking for. I think, Joel, you had this in your spreadsheet of a potential category of like teaching users or training, or I'm trying to find it here. But I think part of where my bias comes from is by using like the network notebooks all the time. And so I'm linking stuff all of the time. It's just like a natural habit. If I'm talking about socialism, I'm going to link it because that's what I do now. And so it's a behavior.
And what do you link it to? The Wikipedia page, for example?
No, my internal links. It's all just internal because that's easy and quick. It's I do the square bracket, and it shows up. And so I have a record of how all of my notes link together. And so when I'm thinking about this blog post, it's like it's just going to be littered with links. And those links in this system to me would all have definitions. But that's not how everyone, or most people, probably don't do that.
That is fair. But then what happens when, okay, you research socialism at some depth, and then you come across many articles about socialism, and they all have subtly different definitions. So you always have the word socialism in bracket, and if you've researched it, you'll have many conflicting definitions in your knowledge base.
To me, that doesn't affect my argument, because if this is also going on the assumption that when I linked it, it linked to a specific timestamped socialism. So whenever I referenced it, I was referencing this. And if I update, that's fine. My previous entries don't change. They aren't affected, because what I posted there meant that.
And what I'm saying is, it may be relevant, and that's what I'm trying to build, to say, well, what are all the claims that refer to this, and do they need to be updated if my definition changed over time? Because maybe.
100%. No, that is 100% true, even in a personal note-taking system. And I think we're going to see that as this space evolves and people use it for a long time and notice, hey, I linked this and I went back to a note I wrote a year ago, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense anymore. Absolutely the case. If you change, and That's a sticking point for me in using network notebooks in general, is whenever I want to change something, if I've linked it 100 times or 15, I have to go through each one. Is this still accurate? Because it's not timestamped,
Correct.
and that's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the goal.
It feels like 80/20 would just be if you have a UID for a thing when you link it. I feel like that's an 80/20 initially, or at least we'll suss out what
It's
else needs to be dealt with.
what I want is, if you have a UUID locally, that's fine. But the problem is how to get also a kind of federated, agreed upon lattice, so that we can then use that as a way to go across and use social definitions.
Now I'm interested, like I think you're correct. I think it's a giant, ridiculously large problem. So I'm wondering if developing in local systems, personal systems, would help inform how the global system could be done, rather than trying to do a top-down approach of solving it first before developing.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that.
You may be right. I don't think that way, because my experience is assumptions you make locally bite you in the ass when you try to be global and distributed. And
Yeah,
but
that's likely true. Yeah.
just my experience. So yeah, that's why I do admit totally I'm suffering from a kind of analysis paralysis about this, because I'm trying to think about all the global cases. I do think it's worth it, because basically I'll suffer later.
Yeah, you need a combination. You need people that are doing what you're doing and others to help inform, I think.
But I'd be happy to continue the conversation, because what are the API requirements, right? So basically, I have a UUID. I ask your system, what was your snapshot at time T, or what's your snapshot now, and how did it evolve, and blah, blah, blah. What's the future history, like the from time T to now of this identifier? And probably we'll get another identifier, because maybe you've kept internally the same identifier, but the global identifier it's pointing to will be different. That's one scenario. Like, okay, what was the identifier at time T? What was your definition of that? And what? And globally, I want to be able to take an identifier and say, okay, what were the definition elements that were, again, that people accepted? And if you add a new one, and this is really important, is it changing the definition? And does that mean I need to fork new identifiers for the new distinction of that new definition element? Or is it just piling up on the same category, or tentatively? And so you'll probably have, a possibly historic view of this was the first distinction that we use for this concept. And this distinction seems to have the same extension, provisionally, but mark it differently, so that we know we can reintroduce a distinction later.
Now, is this category called ontology mapping? Is that kind of generally what you're talking about? Like my ontology
Yeah,
to
there's
the global ontology, or?
Yeah, yes, but also look at formal concept analysis. Formal concept analysis is ridiculously relevant.
I think you mentioned that last call too.
Yeah. Because they are thinking about lattice operations on concepts.
I think that was in the video that Tim linked, where you presented on that. There was like a slide deck of for the purpose of coming up with an identifier, I guess, for canonical claims. I think one of the slides was on that. I don't know. I don't know how detailed it was, so.
So anyway, losing steam a bit, but let's keep in touch. I'm still on Slack, and I'll try to keep you posted. And if you want to have another session, maybe I should. Yeah, I'll try to have another. I hope to have material by next Friday. That I'll try to have a presentation ready by next Friday.
That would be
About
incredible.
For what?
for this for the requirements for the identifiers, not a product, but
Oh.
requirements and more
Okay.
formal requirements.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I have a lots to learn about this stuff, so I'd be very
Okay.
happy to see that.
Listen, so do I. I hope I'm asking the right questions, but do I have the right answers? I don't know. Okay, folks.
All right.
Thanks for today.
Yeah.
It's good.
Bye.
Yep. See ya.